Everything from crunch culture to turning an easy profit has resulted in creators taking shortcuts when it comes to gaming. And one of the most common methods, that I also apply to my list making, is just to recycle what the last one in the series did and hope nobody notices. Of course, this isn't always the case though, as there's always things we want to see more of when it comes to follow-up titles, even if it means we're paying for multiple installments just to do the same things over and over again. I mean, look at FIFA. But just because something is repetitive doesn't mean the game is bad. In fact, it is the basis of what we build franchises on and where we get iconic traits reinforced in the games that we love. Where some are just lazy rehashes, other titles are just so good that sequels don't have a lot of new heights to elevate the series to. If it ain't broke, why fix it? I am the clone of Ash from WhatCulture Gaming, and these are 10 video game sequels with identical gameplay. 10. Every Pokemon game. The Pokemon franchise has been using the same basic formula for so long that it has gone from fun to corny to boring to impressive and then all the way back around again. The first generation of the series introduced the first 151 monster sprites in 1996 and was built around gameplay that anyone who's played this year's Pokemon Sword and Shield will find familiar. You catch a Pokemon by fighting them, each Pokemon has up to 4 moves they can use in turn-based combat, they level up through said combat, and then you use them to catch more Pokemon and traverse through the pixelated world this all happens in. Rinse, cycle, repeat, throw in a few hundred new creatures every time, always start with the 3 cutest of each set for the player to pick from, and give them the option of giving their rival and battle pets humorous nicknames. It's a winning formula. 9. Assassin's Creed Revelations. Assassin's Creed Brotherhood was, from a narrative perspective, a perfect continuation from the franchise high point that was Assassin's Creed 2. From there, the series shifted to Assassin's Creed Revelations, which featured Ezio growing older, becoming wiser, and using new but familiar gameplay mechanics to fight the evil Templar Order in a single, historically important city. The parallels between the two are too obvious to overlook. For example, the Rome of Brotherhood and the Istanbul of Revelations might have had drastically different worlds to parkour through, but both featured almost the exact same shop designs, had sections to be unlocked by capturing and converting Templar hideouts, and were riddled with recruitment missions for the player's growing legion of assassins. Funny that. 8. Far Cry Primal. This one is far looser than the other entries, granted, but the copy-paste has to be noted. Far Cry Primal was a creative and bold new direction to take the franchise in after the gorgeous Far Cry 4. Instead of adhering to the Far Cry formula of insert stereotypical protagonist in exotic but dangerous location and let havoc ensue, Primal was set in a prehistoric period. The player simulated the life of a hunter-gatherer attempting to ensure their tribe's survival. It drew favourable reactions at first, and fans applauded the expansive and beautiful map, a game element that Ubisoft have always excelled at. But then fans began noticing familiar environments, almost like they'd walked these paths and swam these waters before. Lo and behold, bird's-eye view images of the map revealed it was borrowed almost entirely from Far Cry 4, even down to the roads and rivers being near identical. Many things had changed to account for a new time period, and the game developers insisted that Primal was set in Europe while Far Cry 4 was set in the Himalayas. But the overall structure and layout of the game was a carbon copy, built on the same skeleton. If Primal had been a fun continuation or DLC package, fans might not have minded their blatant recycling. But it was a full-priced retail game. 7. Duke Nukem Forever. Duke Nukem was one of the video game staples of the early 1990s. A homage to the buffed-up, hyper-masculine 80s action hero, his trilogy of games let young fans live out a perfect power fantasy of mowing through waves of enemies, spouting curse-riddled one-liners in a gravelly monotone, and, most importantly, getting the babe. After being stuck for almost 2 decades in what could generously be called development hell, Duke Nukem Forever featured Duke doing Duke stuff. Fighting aliens, trash-talking like a 12-year-old, and being as misogynistic as a thrice-divorced drunk cousin at Christmas. Whilst it looked different, Duke Nukem Forever was ostensibly the same game as all the previous games in the franchise. But while Duke was the same old meathead that gamers had fallen in love with, the 90s were long over and global culture had progressed to the point where juvenile jokes and disposable women weren't just signs of a lazy game, they were downright insulting. Ironically, considering the name, Forever had taken so long to come out that people didn't want the same old Duke game they had played with as a kid. So it's a shame that is exactly what they got. Sometimes identical gameplay is all we want, and sometimes it's this. 6. Dark Souls 2. Dark Souls, also known as You Died the Game, has carved out its own unique niche among gaming culture. A punishing experience to say the least, the games are famous for their dodge-based combat, brutal boss fights, and unforgiving death system. And that's largely what people tune in for. Truthfully, because of that, there's not a ton of difference between Dark Souls and its immediate sequel. Both have a dark, high-fantasy atmosphere, and they share lighting and shadow designs. Even their environments, whilst not identical, are so similar that anyone who isn't a hardcore fan of the series wouldn't be able to tell the two games apart. This isn't a criticism though, it is actually far from it. If the gameplay alone is good enough to reinvent the very concept of a hack-and-slash RPG, then don't mess with a winning formula. 5. Portal 2. Puzzle games can involve some of the most creative gameplay innovations in the entire medium. But any game where every mechanic is based around a single element is going to start to feel similar when we hit sequels. The first Portal was an absolute masterclass in FPS puzzle gaming. Players took the role of silent protagonist Chell as she used the eponymous portal gun to solve complex mazes to satisfy and eventually outsmart the villainous AI GLaDOS. The sequel tried to differentiate itself by involving new characters, developing the story, focusing on world building, and including a multiplayer mode for co-op gaming. Whilst there wasn't a very drastic change between the two games, there was enough for the puzzles to be different, though the level layouts were similar and they were solved in the same way. This made both games functionally identical to one another, despite their notable differences. Portal was already pretty much as close to perfect as a game could get, and the only thing that Portal 2 could have done to make it better was just slap a few more bells and whistles on the whole thing and give us more of it. Both games are still some of the best puzzle games ever designed, and are practically necessities for any respectable PC gamer. 4. God of War 3. The first God of War game was a clever subversion of Greek mythology, depicting protagonist Kratos and the Olympian gods as vengeful, violent entities who are ultimately unsatisfied by the conquest they claim to want. The second God of War game doubled down on this theme by showing that the emptiness left in Kratos by his ascension to godhood has caused him to incite needless bloodshed out of boredom and grief. This makes him a threat to Zeus, who tricks Kratos into surrendering his godly powers and promptly throws the upstart deity into the underworld. Driven by sheer hatred and vengeance, Kratos drags himself out of the land of the dead, regains his divine strength, and concocts a plan to use ancient mythological figures to kill Zeus. It ends on a cliffhanger which leads into God of War 3, which begins with Kratos being stripped of his powers he had only just reacquired and being tossed into the underworld. At which point, the cycle repeats. The only real difference between the two games is that Kratos is out to kill all the gods the second time around and decides to use Pandora's box to do so instead of the imprisoned Titans. Still, good fun though, and cyclical narratives are something the most recent 2018 entry has faced head-on. 3. Every Guitar Hero / Rock Band game. Remember that period of gaming when Guitar Hero and Rock Band clashed for the title of which franchise was a better musician simulator? Even though it was glaringly obvious that they were the exact same game and each new installment in both series just had a different playlist over the same gameplay. Sadly, this golden period is behind us. But it wasn't too long ago when no respectable gamer would be caught dead without a plastic guitar and drum kit within 10 feet of their console of choice. The games were based on the simple QuickTime event-style mechanics inspired by old Dance Dance Revolution arcade games. Each game had a different song list and innovative features like new instruments and celebrity cameos. But the sensation of playing each game in either series was repetitive at best. Even when the graphics tried to add variety to the game, by either being uber-stylized or aiming for realism, it always took a back seat to the scrolling fretboards filled with colourful note markers anyway. So it didn't help to make any game distinguishable from one another. They even use the same colour combinations, instrument hardware, and crowd reaction system from game to game. Didn't stop us all from owning every one of them though. 2. Five Nights at Freddy's 2-5. Five Nights at Freddy's stood on its own, but then a sequel was released. And Five Nights at Freddy's 2 was, for all intents and purposes, the exact same game. The only measurable difference was the introduction of a new horror character and the removal of the doors, one of the main gameplay mechanics of the previous installment. In both cases, it was just a matter of waiting for the jump scare and reacting accordingly. But that would not be the end of things. Five Nights at Freddy's 3 was released not long after and had the same story at the same location, though it was set 30 years in the future and had a few new mechanics. And it has continued in the same fashion, scaring people silly and providing endless entertainment with a reskin and story elements to dig into around the same gameplay over and over again. God bless you, Freddy Fazbear, because no one else could ever. 1. Left 4 Dead 2. Valve's Left 4 Dead effectively created the zombie FPS market, still going strong to this day. Up to 4 players at a time could fight their way through waves of zombies broken up by safe houses, with each level building up to one final, frantic dash to reach and secure an escape point. Despite never having any cutscenes, there was a very cinematic element to the game, leading to fan theories that Left 4 Dead was actually a film franchise in Valve's Half-Life universe. But when a sequel was announced and released not too long after the initial game, fans were anxious, and some even started a boycott movement against the sequel. The developers argued that there was too much new content to be released as a DLC, but anyone who purchased the full game knows that that was a bit of a porky. While Left 4 Dead 2 is a bloody quality game, it is functionally identical to its previous entry. The characters and maps were different, but the same zombie types show up. The safe houses are the same, and the general level structure is left unchanged. Honestly though, who cares? More is exactly what this series deserved. And that's our list. I hope you enjoyed literally franchise games, the list. What other game clones belong up here? Share your thoughts in the comment section below. I've been Ash, and this has been WhatCulture Gaming. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and come back again soon for some more lovely gaming content. Thanks for watching.